Starting things off on this SportsMax zone for the Wednesday with an unfortunate development. Only one nation from CARICOM will be participating in the 2025 World Relay set for the 10th and 11th of May in Guangzhou, China. Last year's hosts, the Bahamas, will not be competing in this year's event, marking just the second time in history that the nation will miss the Global Relay Showcase. It is a surprising turn for a country with such a rich relay tradition, one that has proudly hosted the event 4 times and is slated to do so again in 2028. The Bahamas last missed the relays in 2021 during the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. That edition, held in Poland, also saw top nations like the USA, Jamaica and Canada withdrawing. This time, however, the issue isn't global, it's logistical. The Bahamas Association of Athletics Associations says it simply could not field a team, particularly for the men's 4x100 meters and the mixed relay events. Only 4 male athletes were available for the men's 4x100, 1 short of the required 5. And with no extra athletes for the mixed relays, officials say the decision to pull out came down to a harsh reality. Chief Executive Officer of the Bahamas Association of Athletics Associations, Maybelline Miller, put it bluntly, we simply do not have the legs. She joins us now to share more on this difficult decision. Welcome to the SportsMax Zone, Maybelline. It's a topic that we've been talking about in the office for a few days now. Just how difficult was this decision, given what faces the Bahamas and the availability of the athletes? Well, it wasn't difficult because it does appear as if you didn't really have a choice, did you?
Yes, that's correct. The executive board went over discussions a few times, trying to field the best team if we could. And I think our last meeting would have been at the Carifta Games, where we came together to try and make a last-minute push for it. But we didn't have the legs to do it. Like you said, we only had 4 guys who could have helped in the 4x1. We didn't have that 5th person. And so the board made a decision not to enter the team.
Yeah, how disappointing is this, though, for your association? As we said, given the Bahamians' rich history, not only the World Relays as hosts of the event more times than any other country, but also your history of global titles, world and Olympic champions of the 4x100 for women, Olympic gold for the men prior to these times. So from a track and field purist perspective, it just looks disappointing from the Bahamas standpoint.
Yes, it does. And as the board, we realized that as well. And like I said, we had numerous discussions about it because we really wanted to be there. But unfortunately, we just couldn't. And as much as we tried to field the best team we couldn't. We have a lot of our athletes really who would have been able to help or in college and would not have been released to go to the World Relays. And so, like I said, our last meeting was at the Carifta Games, where we tried again to see if we could have pushed the team in, but unfortunately we could not.
Yeah, and Maybelline, this begs the question as to moving forward and planning forward when it comes to this, to ensure that, maybe it doesn't happen again. Have you sat and thought about that yet?
Well, yes. The problem that we're really faced with is most of our key athletes are in college, and college coaches will not release them. That's probably a problem we're going to continue to have, but as persons come out of college and go on that professional scene, we will use those persons. Just at this point in time here now, it was difficult for us to get that additional 1 person or 2 persons to help with the relay because of them being in college and having their college commitments.
Yeah, and was that just the only reason? Because, when things happen, we tend to think they happen in isolation. But apart from the players' unavailability, because of school and all of that, that was the only reason why y'all didn't feel a team, right?
Well, that was the only reason why. The executive board, when we met, we tried to see if we could find that 5th person, and we couldn't. And we deliberated for the longest that day, and we couldn't think of a 5th person who really could have helped the relay team, and so the board had to make a decision at that point.
Yeah, and what's on my mind as well is the fact that you all will be hosting this event in 2028. And, you know, the first thing I thought is, okay, well, this is not a good look because, you know, you're getting ready to host, other countries will watch this. And, you know, as Ricardo said at the top of the show, it's not only Bahamas that didn't field a team, but other Caribbean countries as well as the country I'm from, Trinidad and Tobago. But do you think, did you think about that as well? You know, how it
Yes, we
appeared?
did. Yes, we did. We thought about all of that. All that came into play when we were having our discussions. And if you would have noticed that the relays, once the relays are home in the Bahamas, we have just about all of the relay teams represented in the Bahamas once we have them. And so it's easier sometime at some point when we're home to just field persons from home. But at this point now, a lot of those athletes back then are actually in college now. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the college coaches were not releasing them. And so just to pick up anybody to go up to the games just to say we had a show in, you know, the executives made a decision on it and decided not to.
Yeah, Maybelline, at what stage of this process did you realize that you were in trouble and it was going to be difficult to field teams or any team for the World Relays?
Actually, from the very beginning, once it came out, you know, we were deliberations from then.
When was the very beginning?
When the entry list came out, the preliminary entry list came out, we were discussing it from then.
How long ago was that?
It would have been about 2 months, 2.5 months. And so we were discussing it from then. And like I said, we went through a series of meetings. As the board went through a series of meetings, and we listed the athletes who we know would have been able to help the team once we would have made up our minds to go. But of course, most of those athletes are in college. And it's not for lack of trying. We did try with some of the college coaches, but they were not able to release them at this time.
Yeah, you know, Maybelline, I can just imagine that there are those individuals watching this show now and they're saying to themselves, well, yeah, the preliminary entry list came out 2.5 months ago. That is when the deliberation started. But we've known that the World Relays would be in May from, what, at least a year ago. It is not new to the association that it would be difficult to get the college athletes at this time of the year, especially with the event being in Guangzhou, China, as opposed to on the North American continent. So there are those who would say all of these things were known beforehand. And so why wasn't a plan put in place before 2.5 months ago from the beginning of the season, after the end of last season, to ensure that this did not happen?
Yes, well, we had some guys at home who actually been running. And so a plan was in place in terms of trying to reach those guys. The plan basically was always on the men's 4x1 because that's where we have most of our strength in the men. And so we had a plan of trying to utilize those guys in the men's 4x1. And so the executive put out a time where persons should be running a certain time to be considered or selected for the team. We had persons coming around late in their performance during the time when we could have entered and closed the deadline. We didn't have much of them running the times that we really did put out for them to run. And so we did wait a while again. Like I said in our last meeting was at Carifta. We came across 4 guys who really could have helped the team or to go and represent the Bahamas in the men's 4x1. The executives didn't feel fit to send just only 4 guys without having that 5th person if something should happen to any one of those 4 members. And as a result of not trying to, or as a result of not getting that 5th person, I should say, the board made a decision to just lead the team as is, as opposed to putting in just 4 guys.
Yeah. What happens from here, Maybelline? I remember last year when Jamaica failed to qualify from the World Relays for the men's 4x400, there were 2 attempts following that, including at the National Championships, to make the time required to get in. Of course, it becomes significantly more difficult for the Bahamas now and for all the Caribbean countries who will not be in Guangzhou, China, because it's 14 of the 16 teams per relay that will come from Guangzhou, China. So is there a plan in place place to try and make the time to be among the next two for some of these events? And I suspect the men's 4x100 will be part of that plan.
Yes, there is a plan in place. We actually have the times that the men 4x1 did last year was done with most of the guys from college. And like I said, we have two of the guys home now who are running exceptionally well, who will be able to assist those four guys. And so it's just a matter of us getting them out to a couple of meets after they would have finished college to try keep them together to try qualify the time for the world relays.
Yeah.
Actually, for the world championships.
Yeah. Have you spoken to those collegiate athletes yet, and are they on board with the plan?
Yes, they're on board with the plan. They know exactly what is it that is expected of them, and they know that they couldn't come out right then because of their college commitments, but they're on board with the plan, and they know what's expected of them.
Yeah. And in terms of identifying specific meets that these athletes will be able to qualify, because I remember last year, part of the issue, for example, with Jamaica and the 4x4 is that there were not races readily available. And so in some instances, the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association had to help in putting together races and bringing teams in. So have you been able to identify meets yet? And if not, how is that aspect of the process likely to play out in your own mind?
Well, the technical statistician that we have, so he's looking into trying to find some meets for that time when they're out of college. But if there's no meet available during our nationals, we normally host relays at our nationals, and that would be an opportunity for them.
But that would also mean potentially bringing in other national teams. So you might need to start having that conversation pretty early.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, well, we're going to leave it there, Maybelline. Can we capitalize on the fact that we have you on here now to just get a comment from you about your daughter, the great Shawnee Miller-Weibo, and her retirement status? Because we're not sure if she's going to compete anymore, and she hasn't announced her retirement. So maybe you can tell us what's going on with her.
Well, as it stands now, I know she just got back into training. And so we'll just wait to see what happens. I haven't heard anything about retirement. So we just have to wait to see what happens. I know, but she just started back into training.
Yeah, well, she's a great one. Congratulations, and keep taking care of her.
Yeah, I just
you.
have one quick one for you, Maybelline. Will there be any sort of incentives for the athletes in that attempt to qualify for the World Championships post the collegiate season?
I wouldn't say there's any incentives for them, but we do our best to try compensate them as best as possible to get where they need to go to qualify.
And when you say compensate them as best as possible, what exactly does that mean?
Well, we pay their way to go and make sure they're comfortable wherever they're staying before they compete.
Okay, Maybelline, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great getting the perspective from the athletics bosses in the Bahamas regarding the non-appearance for the World Relays. And we hope that things work out, and there will be opportunities to squeeze in some teams before the deadlines. So thanks, Maybelline, and all the best with the Bahamas Athletics Association.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So as you had said before, the segment kicked off with Maybelline. This isn't really just a Bahamas issue, because it is not customary for just one CARICOM country to be at the World Relays. I know there have been problems before. I think way back in 2019, the Bahamas only sent one relay team to the Tokyo World Relays. I think it was in Japan that year. Yeah. So before now, we have seen evidence that based on the time of the year, it's not always easy to field teams for these events.
Yeah, especially when it is that far away. So I suspect as well that if the event was in the Bahamas or anywhere in the North American region, that the U.S. collegiate coaches would be more willing to send the athletes across, because it's a short trip and they are back quickly. And unless they are missing any significant meets on that particular weekend, like conference or regionals, it's easier. But when you have to travel all the way to China, you're talking about a few more days of traveling back and forth. You're talking about the wear and tear on the legs after competing for 2 days. And U.S. collegiate coaches, they're trying to win. They're trying to win titles as well. They're trying to get their athletes qualified for nationals. So they are going to be unwilling to take their team. But I can't help but wonder as well from just listening to the Bahamas situation specifically, if the planning was not thorough enough. And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, because maybe the depth is just not there at the moment. And if indeed the depth is not there at the moment, then it means that the Bahamas probably has a lot of work to do in terms of how they go forward with their track and field. And yes, we know that Bahamas is a small nation, but we are talking about a nation, Lance and Mariah, who've won the Olympic 4x100 women's title and a world title as well. And they won the 4x4 back in 2012. So I can understand how disappointing it must be. And because of how different the qualifying system is now from some years ago, it makes it so much tougher for them to be able to qualify from here. By the way, I'm not necessarily a fan of this qualification system, but I understand why it is the way it is, because World Athletics wants the World Relays to have significant importance. And I think before qualifying all of 14 teams from the World Relays, then countries, some countries would just go, well, hey, we don't need to send our best athletes, we don't need to send our best teams, because it's 8 that qualifies from here, and after this, we are going to be among the 6 fastest in the world or 8 fastest in the world, so it's all fine. So I understand from World Athletics standpoint, but I'm not in agreement with it necessarily.
I'm trying to remember, though, May 10 and 11 is round about the time that the meet is usually held, but it stretches depending on where it is.
Yeah.
And I know that the NCAA Division Nationals would usually be the first or second week in June.
Yeah.
So if this, and then the divisional championships would be the weeks leading up to that.
Yeah.
So May 10 and 11 would be really close to those NCAA events, which are very important, as we have established with the college coaches.
Yeah,
But we've seen in the past where college coaches have sent athletes to the World Relays when it's in the Bahamas.
Yes.
Because as I said, it's a quick trip across.
Yes.
You're not traveling for
Especially
15 hours on one flight.
Especially for those based in Florida.
Well, there you go. It's a pretty quick trip, and
Yes.
so it's easier. But that's not the case this time around. My issue is everybody knew that from a year ago.
Yes.
But I do understand that still it's difficult. If you don't have the quality, you just don't have the quality.
Yeah, and then to spend that amount of money to send a subpar team to China, I think, you know, when you think about it as an administrative perspective, and then remember, Caribbean countries don't have that kind of money invested when it comes to things like that. So I just want to give both sides a proper listening ear, as opposed to just like, you know, casting judgment
Fair enough.
on one side.
Yeah,
so,
one young man I know is extremely disappointed, is Carlos Brown Jr. He was brilliant at their Carifta trials. Well, they had a development section at the Carifta trials, and he ran like 10.02 seconds, which is a personal best. Now, for you to be in 10.02 shape
In April.
and you're not getting the opportunity to go and represent your country at the World Relays, must be a significant downer for the young man. And the other 3 as well who were available.
Yeah. As we said, though, Jamaica, the only team competing at the World Relays from CARICOM, and disappointing that so many other CARICOM countries, which have already laid a claim to, you know, world-level performances in the sprints especially, aren't there as well. So that's a topic that we can delve into a little bit more as the weeks go on. We go to break. We'll be back with more on the SportsMax Zone after this.